My name is Annika. I'm the Program Manager of Reuse and Reduction at the US Plastics Pact. And today I'm going to be talking to you about our Reuse in Retail initiative. I'll be going through a quick presentation on that, and then I'm excited to be joined on stage by Tim of the Reusable Packaging Association to talk through how B2B learnings in the reuse space can be leveraged to drive success in the B2C retail space. So without further ado, I want to just get into a brief overview on the Pact, who we are, what we do. So the US Plastics Pact is a framework to help companies across the value chain focus their efforts in creating a circular plastics economy. So we are a coalition that brings together brands, retailers, policymakers, NGOs, recyclers to turn ambition into action in this space. And we all have a shared vision where plastics are valued and not wasted. So why is reuse especially important now? So as we all know, US EPR packaging laws are driving demand in this space. This space we know, I mean, it's huge in B2B, but now we're trying to move into B2C here at the US Plastics Pact as well. Here's an overview of the different states that have put forth EPR laws. The most notable being in California with a 2% mandate by January 2027, which is coming up very soon. And then there's a 10% mandate by 2032, which is just shortly after that. So the problem is that a lot of companies are struggling to comply with these mandates. They don't know where to start in the retail space. And that's where we come in. So we started getting into this reuse and retail initiative through launching this report in 2025. This was with Closed Loop Partners, and it's called Getting Ready for Reuse and Retail. It identified 5 product categories that are the top choices, basically, to launch reuse and retail in the US. So it revealed that the 5 product categories were prepared food, fresh produce, beverage, personal care, and home care. So this was a direct output for this reuse and retail initiative that I'm talking to you about today. To get into that a bit more, so what is the Reuse and Retail Initiative? It's a collaborative, pre-competitive effort between brands and retailers designed to accelerate the transition to reusable packaging in retail. We're focusing on 1 to 2 product categories, which I'll get into a bit more on a later slide. We're going to be launching in an existing EPR state, so those states that I showed in that overview table before. Most likely it's going to end up being California just because that 2% mandate by 2027, but all are up for consideration right now. It's a scalable, iterative implementation model focusing on long-term systems change. So there's been a lot of pilots in the retail space, both in the US and elsewhere, especially in the UK, other parts of Europe. But what's different about this model is that it's a pre-competitive initiative, and we're bringing together a bunch of brands and retailers to work together to really make this a long-term program, building off of those one-off pilots that have been done in the past. There's a really large emphasis on consumer engagement, so we are working with WRAP in the UK, which I'll get into a bit more. They really focus on consumer behavior change. And they also are pulling in a lot of global expertise from other pilots that have been done elsewhere, which is great. We're going to be building on existing and planned infrastructure that comes from EPR. And then once we have determined a region, which is going to happen by the end of this year, I'll get into the process for that in a bit. We'll be working with specified regional governments in that area, as well as local reuse service providers. And this is also open to all brands and retailers, regardless of US Pact membership. So where does the value really come from for this initiative? It's catalyzing action toward meeting EPR mandates now. It's helping to reduce those compliance fees early before they actually set in. Because this is a focused, pre-competitive effort and these brands and retailers are able to share risk, that's going to increase the return on investment over time. So That's through creating operational efficiencies like pooled packaging design, like shared investment in reverse logistics, and then also just wider availability of these products for consumers is going to improve accessibility. With more access, more consumers are going to pick it up. If they see, oh, I have this option available at this store and this brand and this other store, then they're much more likely to pick it up than if it's just at one shelf at one retailer. So as I mentioned before, we're really lucky to be working with a network of partners on this project. I'm going to start in the bottom left corner. So our two formal partners for the project are Upstream and WRAP. So Upstream is a US and Canada-based nonprofit focusing on just general advocacy for reuse. They bring about a lot of awareness on existing reuse infrastructure. They also do a lot of policy work. And then WRAP is a global nonprofit. We're working a lot with their UK branch. And as I said, they're bringing in that consumer behavior expertise as well as those global learnings. And some informal partnerships. So the Consumer Goods Forum, they're doing some work in Ottawa right now, very similar to this project. So we're pulling learnings from that. The Reusable Packaging Association, which I'll be talking with Tim about later, Perpetual, and also PR3. So we've kind of broken this up into a web of the components of a successful reuse system. So those components are policy. So how do we use the laws that are coming into place to drive initiatives like this, and what is already in place and what's coming up? Reverse logistics, so how do we create a system that is not only the most efficient, but also the most environmentally friendly through transportation, digital tracking, collection, washing, etc. Packaging design, so as I said before, making that pooled packaging design, but then also balancing that with customization for brands so that they can remain competitive. Governance and finance models, so that's all about ownership. We're working a lot with the Ottawa team for that. Change management, what internal stakeholders in the companies need to be pulled in to actually bring something like this to life. Consumer engagement, I've already mentioned this, but again, how do we get consumers to pick something like this up over the single-use option on shelf? And then existing expertise, we kind of broke it up into two areas. So global learnings, that's coming from WRAP, Upstream, CGF, and Perpetual. And then also B2B learnings, which that's Reusable Packaging Association. And then of course, not on this graphic are the actual brands and retailers who are going to be helping to build this system. All right, so getting into the scope of this project. So as for product categories, we are considering 4 from the Closed Loop Partners report. So it's going to be either prepared food or fresh produce as the first. Oh, there we go. Prepared food or fresh produce is the first, and then home or personal care as the second. And as for the reuse model, so we are taking a look here at the Ellen MacArthur's Foundations for Reuse Models. We are considering strictly return from home or return on the go, just based off of feedback from our member companies, which we call activators. So that's the model where the customer actually returns the packaging in store or at their doorstep to be cleaned, and then the product is refilled and they just buy it filled, rather than having to fill it themselves. This is our timeline for the on-shelf product categories. So we're currently in the scoping phase. So that actually starts this Thursday. And what this consists of is 8 meetings that are divided up into kind of 2 areas. So some of them are like educational sessions, and then the others are the actual scoping sessions where the determinations are made. So we're trying to kind of give all of the member retailers and brands the knowledge they need and the background in order to make educated decisions on the region, reuse model, and product categories for the rest of the initiative. And then there's also going to be a few different tangible outputs that come from the scoping phase. So that includes a end-to-end systems map, a stakeholder analysis grid, and also a consumer engagement plan. And the ultimate launch is going to be in January 2028 for the on-shelf product category. But the goal is to iterate it and scale it up to other regions and product categories after that. Again, really focusing on this long-term implementation. As for the fresh food product category, the timeline is very similar, just slightly condensed. So the scoping phase is going to be at the same time. All of 2026 will be focused on program design and solution development, and then 2027 implementation for a launch in July 2027. And the goal of that is to just help meet those EPR mandates sooner, especially for California. Because the reverse logistics processes aren't quite as complicated for a product that's packed in store, we figured we could condense this one a little and help get those EPR mandates taken care of a little bit earlier. All right, so that was a very quick overview of this project. If you're interested in talking more, I'd love to have a conversation with you. My contact info is at the bottom, and we also have a booth in the West Hall. I think it's W104, I believe. So feel free to come and chat with me. I also have some documents you're welcome to scan. Hopefully the QR codes work. And while you do that, I want to invite Tim up to stage. All right, welcome, Tim.
Thank you so much.
So, Tim has been a super valuable and engaged activator with the US Plastics Pact for years. I've only been on the team for a few months, but I've already had the pleasure of working with him a lot. He helped to develop the US Plastics Pact's Reuse Catalyst program, designed for reuse playbook, reuse policy guidance, and he also judged our innovation awards a couple times, I think. Yeah, so lots of involvement. And some of the conversations that we've had as of recent have been on how we can leverage B2B infrastructure and learnings to potentially use it in the B2C space for initiatives like the RRI. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. So Tim, if you can tell us first a little bit about how RPA was founded and how has your mission and approach to accomplishing that mission changed over time?
Yeah, thanks so much. Just very proud to say that RPA as a trade association has been around for over 25 years, starting in 1999, actually at a coalition at that time. There was actually some interest from the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency about concerns of solid waste increases, and they were tracking the growth on a per capita consumption of solid waste that was being produced out in the market and, of course, in the landfills. And so the association came together to help address that. But one of the catalysts at the time was that Walmart was moving their fresh fruit and vegetable program from single-use packaging to reusable plastic containers. They wanted to make the whole transition as they were growing their supermarket or their grocery section of the Walmart supercenters. And that required industry to come together to coordinate because they were interested in not only the RPC products and availability and pooling and design, but certainly the reverse logistics that were needed to pull them out of the stores. And so it really kind of propelled the industry to organize together with a variety of different parties to help support that integration or that adoption. And so the coalition was established there that eventually became an association not too far after that, with all of the learnings and experiences of how to collaborate behind, in this case, a single large conversion from single-use to reusables. And so the origin of the organization really started as a nonprofit and has continued through the years as an education arm for promoting and advocating, both out in the marketplace, but also in public policy and some legislators and regulators learning more about what indeed that system of reuse is and how that should be factored within policy initiatives, for example.
Yeah, I think that's so interesting to hear that coming about story. I think it really shows the importance of having that brand champion or retailer champion to help bring things like this to life and help tell the industry, this is where we need to go, now how do we do it? Yeah.
Very much. It's leadership, right? Market leadership to saying this is not only what we want to do, but why we want to do it. and it's building that business case. And for Walmart in particular, they took a page that was happening in the European fruit and vegetable market with reusable packaging and saw that there was savings in backroom operations, logistics, handling, more importantly, product quality, product protection of perishable items. That used to come in with compressed boxes on pallets and leaning over, where now all of a sudden all that product is being protected by the more durable container. So they were saying, look, let's launch as premium fruit and vegetable products here and look at all the savings that we can acquire. So that was something that you had to have that leadership, but that foresight also to see the potential of reuse. And I think that still stays true today as far as that industry leadership, but you've got to have that vision of understanding the holistic system of reuse and the opportunities that it has. And that's what you're buying into.
Yeah, definitely. So your members have been doing this for a while, and I'd just love to hear what challenges do you find still exist in the B2B space for implementing reuse?
Yeah, there's several challenges, but some that are above others. We're still dealing with a culture of single use waste, where packaging and the waste that is created is low to no value. And we pass it along, and it's being dealt with over decades, generations of that's how we do things. And that culture is really tough to turn. Even in reusable transport packaging in the supply chains where there is much greater adoption of reuse, we are still very much have that mindset and that culture, and then follow that, the operations for single use. And so what we really need to continue to do is that business case, the compelling nature of reuse in our particular area of the supply chain, and demonstrate that what's needed up front in terms of that mindset and culture and the operations to support is well worth the investment. So one of the biggest challenges still is breaking through from a linear system of moving your goods to that circular. And having that optimized circularity of reuse as a main component of your business. So that is indeed an area. The other one would be, it's not cheap to design and build a reusable packaging system and have large volume or assets available to be able to support at scale. So there's a capital cost, there's an investment. Now, the industry has developed over the years ways to alleviate that investments, such as rental programs, where all the cost of the capital isn't exercised all at once, and it's amortized over time. And so these are the kind of solutions on the finance side that are needed. But you need to have scale. You need to have strength in numbers, and oftentimes that could be an inhibitor of actually investing and having that scale achieved for reusable packaging at a level of volume that's needed in operations.
Yeah, and it's interesting to hear that, because I mean it's the same challenge in the business to consumer space. We're going up against the single-use system that has had decades and decades to mature, and in order to get over that, it really has to be a systems approach, which I think that's what makes your organization and what this initiative that we're trying to bring about so special. It requires that.
When you're breaking the way of business or a way of doing things over generations, it's disruptive. Going from a linear to a circular system can be very disruptive for all facets of the operations. That in itself is challenging. That in itself is could be costly, let's say, in terms of the investment, the learnings, the applications. So by nature, systems change is disruptive. And so many times that barrier is like, well, we just don't want to disrupt what we're doing. We're going to keep the status quo and just fine tune things and save pennies here, pennies there. But disruption in any parts of life, though, it's something that we adopt to and adapt to, and then ultimately it becomes the norm and the standard operating procedures, and in most cases, a better way of doing things. And so, systems change is something that is often a deterrent, but one that's needed when you go from single use to reuse. And I think it's the same for consumer primary packaging as well.
Yeah, 100%. Okay, so now that we've discussed some different challenges, I'd love to hear about space or areas that you've seen innovation and progress in the B2B transport packaging space.
Right. The most exciting by far is technology and having tech-enabled reusable packaging systems. But as part of that is the automation space. As many companies now are investing in automated fulfillment centers, robotics, having warehouses. I've heard the term dark warehouses, where it's basically run all by machines and robotics. They keep the lights off because they can operate in the dark. And they're picking product and pulling and getting them ready for shipment, all done autonomously. And that's fascinating. Well, in order to achieve that, generally speaking, you need packaging that can conform to those kind of rigorous operations. You need to have packaging that robots can always have the same dimensions and have very tight specifications to be able to move product. In many times, that's durable, reusable packaging that could be used in such automated environments. And so as that technology and that adoption of automation increases, this is an opportunity for reusable packaging to show its value. And in technology, when you're dealing with track and trace, creating visibility in the supply chain, these are things that are working well, but it's only taking off now in terms of the real world application. It's just starting, and that's where we see a lot of opportunity. When you're looking at the cost comparison of reuse, and you show the value proposition of reuse. 10, 20 years ago, it was somewhat difficult in being able to show apples to apples, let's say, of single use versus reuse. Now, all of a sudden, when you're looking at technology and automation and the value creation that you can bring to your operations, the value that technology can bring to your suppliers and then your customers, it's a game changer. You're talking different levels of value creation for businesses with tech-enabled and automation with reuse that didn't exist 10 years ago. So you're from a financial and economic model standpoint, it's changing. The landscape is changing. And so now it's no longer apples to apples, in my opinion. Reuse the opportunities that we have in generating in the modern future supply chain is really exciting. And so I think that's going to break through. And I do think when tech can be applied to reusable cups in foodware, that's when we're going to see, again, it's going to be a much greater value to go to the reuse system. It's going to break through what previously was a deterrent.
Yeah, definitely. And what, other than, leveraging technology, or maybe you could even provide, specific examples of that, but what do you think is required in order to turn this collaboration from theoretical to practical, from this advancement in technology and all these innovations? How do we actually use those for business to consumer contexts?
Yeah, it's a great question, because what we're dealing with is a lot of different parts to the operation, whether it's the supply chain, a lot of different, even still today, silos within organizations and within companies. Certainly when you're dealing with consumer packaging, right, you're bringing in the marketers, those new sustainability professionals, front-end merchandising, salespeople. It's a whole nother area. What really is required in the coordination, it goes back to the leadership that's needed, a central point that can really bring all the stakeholders together and provide the leadership that's needed when there's bumps in the road, or when the P&L doesn't necessarily look like you want it to in a particular area. So it's that executive support from leadership in corporations that are able to speak to the entire system. Right? You may have an area where the warehouse is disrupted a little bit. And they're going to take a hit, let's say, on this year's P&L because they had to have manpower to redo the racking system, for example. You need to have that executive support saying that's okay, because the big picture is that next year we're going to save, and next year after that it's going to be an exponential win. So these are the types of things that is very important, and I think even more so in the consumer facing, right? Because that's where the rubber hits the road. Mm-hmm. You don't want to mess too much with your customers, right? You don't want to mess too much with the consumer. And so it takes that level of saying, leadership, I'm confident, I know what we're doing. We're going to have a better product that eventually is going to be more convenient for the consumer. Mm-hmm. It's going to be a better experience, and it's going to delight our customers. And if you can establish that mindset and articulate it throughout the organization, and with reuse, right, with the system, it's got to be your suppliers and your customers. it's that type of organization and that cohesiveness to the mission that I think is so important.
Yeah, that long-term systems approach is so key to something like this. And I think not only from an internal perspective, but also just working with customers, helping consumers to see if you try this, once or twice, it might become a lot more easy and feasible for you than, the first time. It feels so weird doing something like this. I'm a very environmentally conscious consumer, but it's challenging to implement something like this. But through, repetition and again, accessibility, having this available across multiple retailers, brands, et cetera.
I'll preface that I may be naive and biased here, certainly, for sure. But I often think that with B2C or consumer packaging, we don't give the consumer enough credit. Mm-hmm. We're almost fearful of changing the status quo or the convenience to the consumer. And I think it's okay to work with the consumer on something that requires change. And as a consumer, we adapt to that. I think consumers certainly can come around and see a better system, and it may require some different practices. I liken it to the shopping bags. I went to reusable shopping bags, and again, I'm reusable packaging. Mm-hmm. And I would forget the bags in my car. I mean, but after a while, I never forget them. And honestly, I like packing them in the reusable better myself. I skip the checkout. I go, and I'm like, okay, well, yeah, I'm a pretty finicky consumer as well, but yeah, I adopt it, and it's a better system. And so sometimes I think we're a little bit fearful, and then also someone who loves the environment. It's like, well, look what convenience has gotten us, right? Yeah. The offset of convenience is all of the trash and waste and landfill and pollution. Maybe we need to be inconvenienced just a little bit. I may be alone on that, but please inconvenience a little bit to a better system. And I think, it's easy to point to the consumer as a barrier, but I do think there's opportunities there for that better system. Yeah,
I think it really just requires properly engaging them and making it easy for them. And then once they see how easy it is, then they can actually adopt it. Okay, so I know we're starting to run low on time, I think. I wanted to ask, what opportunities do you foresee for RPA members in being a part of the transition to reuse in retail in business-to-consumer context? Yeah,
this is a key question, and why RPA has been involved with the U.S. Plastics Pact largely from the beginning. Is because there are reusable systems in place successfully in retail, behind the store, your pallets, your containers, totes, bread trays, milk crates, right? There's already an established operation going through a lot of major retailers back of the store in terms of salvage and collecting products that are reusable. That are put into a consolidation center, that are then shipped to washing and cleaning stations. This already exists at scale throughout the country. And so when you're looking at consumer packaging in retail involvement, is how do we leverage what already exists? It's easier said than done, right? But the idea is, let's not overlook what already can work for reusable packaging in a retail environment when operations are already in place. And can we grow both? Can we grow both operations or supply chain reuse? And I've always likened it to like the trunk of the tree. Let's establish that first. It doesn't involve the consumer. And then once that's in place, you've got the culture, the operations, the mindset. Then you can branch out into the consumer reuse models much easier. So I think maybe that supply chain or B2B, and that's what I'm hoping our industry can bring, is that established presence that has some scale already. And can that be leveraged for the retail reuse initiative, for example, one of the categories you mentioned, especially if it's like fresh produce that's heavily adopted in reusable packaging, maybe it's an easier road to bring those stakeholders together and help with that conversion.
Yeah, 100%, yeah. Do you have anything else that you wanted to add? Any last thoughts? I think we're running low on time.
No, we can certainly close. It's exciting to see what the U.S. Plastics Pact is doing in reuse. Again, having looked and worked with the Pact very early on, to see this one single focused initiative, that was the important thing, is don't try and do everything reuse. Try and do one thing really, really well. And that's exactly what's come around. And so from the leadership with the Plastics Pact, Annika, your role in taking over this initiative and leading that is so important. And I think we as an industry can really rally and get behind a single initiative and demonstrate the power of what that could lead to from reuse and refill. And we're just getting started. The other last maybe parting thought is reuse is continuous improvement. It's always getting better. It's never done. And so sometimes when you're looking at comparing single use to reuse, you're comparing reuse at its most disruptive stage at the very beginning, when it's only going to learn, it's only going to adopt it to grow and scale and become more efficient. And so reuse is always in that continuous improvement mode. And I think that's what we're going to find with this retail initiative getting started. We'll get over the bumps. And then all of a sudden now that is going to be a road to the future. And I'm really excited about doing what we can to support the initiative.
Yeah, I'm really excited too. And like you said, like why do it all over again? Why not leverage the existing knowledge that we already have? So we're really excited to continue working with you on this. And thank you for having me today and for all your support of the reuse programs at the Pact. And if anyone has any questions for me, feel free to come up after. Or again, we're at booth W104, the US Plastics Pact. So
thank you, Annika. Appreciate it. Thanks for being here.